Exit 12 is not affiliated with any 12-step group or outside organizations. The purpose of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. No person or organization is receiving any monetary gain from the recording, production, or distribution of this podcast. All hosts and guests are participating of their own free will and are only sharing their own personal experiences. Subjects discussed in this podcast may be triggering for some individuals. Listeners' discretion advised.
Welcome to Exit 12. I am not your host, Brian Fields. I am Michelle Parker, joined by our co-host, Isaac, and then we also have Maggie filling in.
Yay! Maggie's an employee.
Yeah.
So now we can force her to do as many podcasts as we want.
And then one of our special guests today is Michael Carson. He's a well-known person here in the Valley.
Vice president of the My House Board of Directors and 36 years sober.
By the grace of God.
So, no better person to talk about Step 10 with, right?
Yeah.
I'm told because I know nothing. So, we're going to find out.
All right. If you need homeless or at-risk youth services, you can come to My House, 300 North Willow Street, downtown in Wasilla. We also have a residential treatment for clients who are of 18 to 25.
Correct.
So we have open beds available.
And I already saw I screwed up the run of show, so I was wrong. Michelle, I'd like to promptly admit that to you. And when you go to read Step 10, you'll just have to read the top quote because I left Step 8 where you were supposed to read. So I just wanted to admit when I was wrong.
Okay. All right. So today...
Oh, Michael didn't silence his phone. And so, Michael, if you can...
That's okay. All right. So today we're talking about Step 10. And so that is continue to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So, how is this step different from steps 4 and 5?
That is definitely my first question because I thought we already did this, Michelle. Michael, I already made a personal inventory. Why do I have to keep making a personal inventory?
That also says in the bid book that we can't rest on our laurels. For those people that might not know exactly what laurels are what Roman empires wore like a crown, and they were leaves, gold leaves, and they were kind of like medals or accomplishments. And so this step reminds us that every day we need to be able to work this step to ensure that our thinking doesn't take over. And if our thinking takes over, as this alcoholic would become selfish, dishonest, fearful, and this step helps to alleviate that and continue to be in action all the time. So the key word is this idea of an inventory of my disturbances, which drives all of my behaviors and all of my actions. So I always have to be consistent and always have to persist in looking at myself honestly.
And you said this was before we were recording, you called it a maintenance step because now 10, 11, 12, we're getting to the point where we've done steps 1 through 9. Now this is the stuff that we are continuing to do and the work that we're continuing to put in moving forward.
Exactly. And then also there's that key word promptly. How is that defined? So everybody probably looks at that differently. And in my case, trying to catch it sooner than later, as if I allow it to be later, then all of a sudden I can start rationalizing. I can start making excuses. I can start, like you said, rest on my laurels and think about what I accomplished yesterday. But yesterday was yesterday. And having to live in the present and having to live in the present in open, honest relationships with other people. And if I mess up, just being willing to first acknowledge it and say, that I'm sorry if I need to say I'm sorry. I heard there's 3 places to stand in life. One is to step forward and call bull on bull. The other one is
Michael. Now we have to bleep that. Now Ozzy has to do more editing.
and then the second place is to stand your own ground, and then the third place is to step back and say you're sorry when you need to say you're sorry. But all of that only happens in prayer, and where to stand, what to say, how to deal with it, trying to live. I think another way to look at this step is how to live, life on life's terms with everybody else that you're encountering. And I've also heard that everybody, no matter who they are, they're in some kind of struggle, and everybody's challenged, and we're all fallible, and we're all just trying to make it through one day at a time. And so this step really helps me keep myself in check.
Yeah, so for me, like the how it's different from 4 and 5 is, so like step 4 is like, you're identifying those things, your character defects and everything. But step 10 is like knowing that defect is showing up, and like where you can make that quick accountability for yourself.
Yeah, if I know that I'm selfish and self-centered, then by the time we're here, I can identify my behavior and go, oh, look, right there, I was selfish and self-centered. I need to promptly admit that and correct that.
Right, because, those behaviors in my life wrap me around the axle and throw me in the ditch. And so when I'm, walking that road of recovery, I have to be very aware that the ditches on both sides of the road are very close. And being able, like Michelle mentioned earlier, identifying all those defects of character, not a defected character, because, I can beat myself up forever on that, but just knowing what my liabilities are, but also, knowing what my assets are, and being able to, just keep that all in balance. It's just has a lot to do with balance. It has to do with, just preserving the day and being able then at night to be able to review it again. That's the next step, but,
Yeah, like my sponsor last night, like I was talking to her and she was talking about the 10th step and like praying and like pausing, taking a step back, recognizing where my character defects are showing, how I'm showing up, and then like recognizing what could I do better in this situation, how could I respond better, like taking myself out of myself and showing up appropriately. And, like she was getting on me last night about that too. But like, it's something that I personally have to remind myself every single day that like, I am human. These character defects do show up, but I do have the tools now to appropriately address them and make sure that I'm showing up as a good, honest human being in this life today.
I really like that idea where you said separating or stepping away and getting a bigger picture of ourselves and using ourselves as our higher angel to be able to look at ourselves objectively. Before even starting these steps, all my problems were because of you.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And, I'm all about blaming, I'm all about, shifting and being able to, maneuver so that, I stay intact. But in reality the fact was I was not. And so, yeah.
So, Michael, we've been reading the prayers for each of the different steps. Do you have the step 10 prayer pulled up? That will help give me some context.
Yes, thank you, Isaac. The 10th prayer has to do with growth. I pray, God, that you remove my selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Help me to quickly make amends if I harmed anyone, and help me to resolutely turn my thought to someone I can help. So again, getting out of myself, being able to look at myself objectively, but then also the next part of it is being able to go to someone that is in more need than I am, and getting out of myself and realizing that, I've got it pretty good.
Yeah. I think like it definitely is relying on our higher power for those things too, because when we get so wrapped up in ourselves and everything, like we fall back. Like Maggie was saying, we're human, and so I think having that prayer definitely is helpful for identifying like where you have been wrong or if you need to make amends with someone, and
Yeah, and Michael kind of touched on it already, but when we're saying promptly in the, when we were wrong, promptly admitting it, how prompt is that? How prompt is prompt? How prompt do we need to be?
I think for me, part of that also involves me being able to compose some thoughts in my mind that are caring, understanding. I don't want to make the thing worse, right? So, I think what could happen in my case, if I jumped in too quickly, I might say something that I regretted. I might say something that, so I really need to kind of not belabor it, and, write an essay on it or, spend, weeks or months on that, but just being able to step back for a moment and say, okay, I just want to make sure that I'm caring and thoughtful and gracious about this, and that, and you know what, I have to take the fall. I was the person that needed to do this, and it's not your fault. And yeah, so.
Well, speaking of essays, Michelle's brought homework apparently.
So this is what my sponsor had given me. So this is like, I guess could answer your question, how prompt is promptly. So.
Because you have to catch it first to even know.
Yeah, so how she described me to do it is to say that prayer and then go over my nightly review. And so she suggested me to do it in the morning instead of like my thoughts pondering at night. But here are some of the questions on here. Were we resentful? Were we selfish? Were we dishonest?
Check.
Were we afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? So my sponsor told me, like, if I need to talk to her about something, like I have to ask myself, like, can this wait in the morning, or can this wait for my weekly checkup, or do I have to get this off my chest right now? Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? And ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. So, yeah, it really is like checking yourself. Like,
that's pretty thorough.
Yeah, it's like a roadblock. Like, you're not going back there.
The amount of times I have filled this out and sent it to my sponsor, like, have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Like, I would admit in that part that I was dishonest about something that I'm like stewing in, and like recognizing what was my part in that, like, and most of the time I recognize like I'm a very fearful person. And so with that being said, like I try to cover it up. I try to act like, nothing's going on. So this really helps pull that out of me and recognize my patterns, like my character defects, what I'm thinking and feeling, and recognize like what could I have done better in that situation, what was my thought pattern, my feelings, my thoughts, and learning to acknowledge those in a healthy manner rather than just ignoring them or being like like Michael said, validating them.
So maybe not a roadblock, but more of a border checkpoint. Like you're not going to smuggle any fearfulness past the border patrol here.
Yeah, well, I think also too, like right here, were we kind and loving toward all? Like my sponsor is saying, she's like, most of the time when I fill that out, I always say no.
Yeah, how am I supposed to say yes to that?
Because like
everybody,
we're human, you know, like we fall back sometimes, and that's okay. And so like, I think having this definitely helps you identify those things, and it like not have those resentments, and so like I think a lot of time in my addiction, I definitely, I would get into an argument or whatever, and I would have these resentments, and I oftentimes would drink over it. And it was always them to blame. It was always their fault. It was always this.
Because now there's an excuse.
Yeah. And now, like, my life today, like, I'm so quick to, like, hold myself accountable. And I'm so quick to identify those things. I was like, maybe I was a little bit selfish today. Maybe I did have a little bit of ego in myself today. And so, like, I think about those things now. And, like, and my sister, too. Like, my sister, she was talking to me about a text message that she sent to someone, and she's starting to identify that. And I'm like, I pointed that out to her. I'm like, Carla, you remember, like, how quick you were just, like, immediately wanting to fight and do this and that and whatever? But now you're, like, questioning, is this right? Do I show up this way? I don't feel like I should be showing up this way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Michael, you have been working Step 10 for 36 years. Has your approach to this step changed at all over the course of your recovery?
Yeah. After hearing Michelle mentioned, should this be discussed with another person? Early on in sobriety, when something would come up, I'd always have to go to my sponsor and get kind of that, reality check. And I find that now, with some sobriety under my belt, that I don't have to do that as often. I can kind of, figure it out myself by self-checking and truly being honest with myself. Now, if something comes up really big and it's pretty, traumatic and dramatic, I definitely will have to, run it by somebody. But as time goes, I think people that are in recovery kind of get a better idea of themselves and their character defects and their inventories. So it's that whole idea of practice makes better. And just being able to become, as you mentioned, Isaac, earlier, becoming aware, first of all, what is going on. And then, because I do remember having an incident where I ended up an incident happened when I was on the road. I went home and I thought about it for a while, and I said, I really need to go back. And so I did go back, and I apologized, and it was really interesting. The other individual said, oh, it wasn't a really big deal. And I said, yeah, it was a big deal. And then they said, yeah, it was a big deal. So, does that work as far as being promptly? It all happened probably, within an hour or two, and I was able to get it, resolved. And because another issue I think can happen is if we don't do that, oh my gosh, then what happens is it can really start building up and really getting tangled up. And then all of a sudden my thinking just goes sideways, and it's just, the sun's going to burn out and then the world's going to come to an end, right? And because that's where I can go.
And it's like the pebbles in the backpack. I think we've used that analogy before, but you're just picking it up and like, oh, well, just add that in. That's just a little. I'll just add that one in. I'm just going to add that one in. Now you got a 60-pound rucksack that you're carrying around all of a sudden.
And oftentimes that could lead to a relapse, if you hold on to those things.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. And because the thinking happens before the first drink.
There's multiple steps before a relapse, like it's mentally, physically, like spiritually, like it hits all those points until finally you do take that drink. And that's something that with me being in recovery, like I noticed, like if I start stepping back mentally, I can feel it. I know what that feels like, what the thoughts are, and I'm able to recognize that today and be like, okay, what do I need to do to remedy this? Because I know where this leads, and I don't want to go back there.
Yeah, going back there early on, I felt comfortable in that skin. And, when I was using, because I was great at, using all the different kinds of, blaming game and all that. But now what happens is I become uncomfortable just because I have something that's I'm hanging on to, something that I know is just not going right, feeling right. And so it has been, a difference in just the way I think and I feel around this. And I don't want to go back feeling the way I felt. I mean, oh my God, it was just not a place to be. And I don't want to ever go back there. And I think that's what part of this step is, that, we don't have to go back if we're always conscious and persistent of continually do this step.
Right. Michelle, you've got the 12 and 12 pulled up.
I do. I was just kind of scrolling through and looking at some of the readings on there, but there's a couple of good parts in here. I'll read from page 93, I guess. We can try to stop making unreasonable demands upon those we love. We can show kindness where we had shown none. With those we dislike, we can begin to practice justice and courtesy, perhaps going out of our way to understand and help them. Wherever we fail any of these people, we can promptly admit it to ourselves always, and to them also, when the admission would be helpful. Courtesy, kindness, justice, and love are the keynotes by which we may come into harmony with practically anybody. When in doubt, we can always pause, saying, "Not my will, but thine be done." And we can often ask ourselves, am I doing to others as I would have them to do to me today? I'm gonna stop there. So, but yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing. It's like, a lot of times people will think about the step 10 and they'll stop themselves, like if they're in the middle of something and like, God, is this your will? Like, your will, not mine. And like kind of let go of that. And so instead of having that control, it's like letting go of that powerlessness.
Yeah.
And just knowing that I am human.
It's like that saying, thy will not be done. Like it's like on my will, like I don't succeed, but on my higher power's will, like, it's a whole different story. And, that's what I try to live today.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, what would all of you say to someone that they're through step 9, and that's it, kind of our joke going in. The whole reason we started this was around a conversation about step 8, step 9, and how that's it's so difficult. It's like the seminal moment in your recovery journey, in your 12-step journey. What would you say to someone that has just come out of that is now on step 10 for the first time and getting ready to live this for the rest of their life?
Well, I think 12 and 12 also talks about this idea of being easy on yourself, and that we're not always going to be spiritually fit all the time in every situation. So I think this step also involves us being, besides apologizing to someone else, apologizing to ourselves and forgiving ourselves, because this is basically, for the rest of our lives, right? So what's happening is, we just don't do this and we're done. Mm-hmm. It's just something that's ongoing. I think, progress, not perfection, and being able to kind of keep that in balance and not beating ourselves up. Because truthfully, there are times when maybe a week goes by and all of a sudden I think about a situation and I think, oh, maybe I need to do something about that. And, it's just like I didn't think at that time that it was a big deal. And maybe, God then put some seeds in my head and my thinking about, oh, yeah, maybe I need to look at this. So I think we all, there isn't any way that we're always totally going to be 110% spiritually fit. I mean, that's not what AA is about. It's just progress, not perfection. One step at a time. May it be a weak step or a small step, just one step at a time. Yeah.
No, I agree with that. I also think too, like we could be hard on ourselves, but we could also let our ego get inflated too.
Just like, the opposite, polar opposites.
Yeah, it could go both ways too, because like
right.
when we complete these steps too, like or like get to this point, we think that we're above everyone, and we don't have to go back at all. But we really do. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to have this and really check ourselves so we're not getting in our own head and we're high and mighty.
Just trying to be better people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing the next right indicated action.
Yep. Very much so.
All right. There's no outro, but Michelle, you can lead us out.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you guys for joining us this week. It was a pleasure having you guys, and yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Oh, absolutely.
See
Thank
everyone
you
for step
joining
11.
us. Yeah. Yeah.